Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer on the United States Constitution and Federalism. You know, when we think of the Constitution, it's super easy to just picture this old, dusty piece of parchment sitting under glass at the National Archives. But today, I want us to look at it totally differently. Think of it as the ultimate architectural blueprint for our government. Just like a blueprint dictates exactly where the walls, the doors, and the load-bearing pillars of a physical building go, our Constitution designs the very structure of our nation. It dictates exactly where the power resides.
So, here is our agenda for today. We're going to cover 1. The blueprint of government. 2. Separation and checks. 3. Federalism, sharing the power. 4. Amendments and protected rights. And finally, 5. A recap and final question.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the blueprint of government.
Now, before you can build any structure, you absolutely need foundational principles, right? You got to know what the building actually stands on. For the United States, that foundation is built on popular sovereignty. This is the democratic principle that a government's power comes directly from the consent of the governed. In our system, we, the people, hold the ultimate power. And when the framers drafted the Constitution, this was a massive, revolutionary shift away from the historical monarchies of Europe, where power supposedly just came from a king. Here, the people are the ultimate bosses.
And honestly, because the people are the bosses, we get this really important concept, limited government. This is the idea that the government is not all-powerful. It can literally only take actions that are explicitly permitted by the people. The government has strict boundaries, so it's not supposed to just interfere in all aspects of our daily lives. The blueprint clearly boxes in what the government is actually allowed to do.
Okay, let's pause and check for a second. If the government's power is strictly limited by this blueprint, how did the framers ensure no single group or no single person gets way too much of it? Like, how do you practically enforce those limits so the whole structure doesn't just collapse into a dictatorship? Think about that for a moment.
Well, here is the immediate reasoning. They divided it. The absolute genius of the U.S. Constitution is that it splits up power in two entirely different directions. They sliced it horizontally across different branches at the national level, and they also sliced it vertically between the national government and the state governments. Let's look at exactly how they pulled that off.
Moving right along to Section 2, Separation and Checks.
So, the first 3 articles of the Constitution establish 3 completely independent branches of the federal government. Article 1 sets up the legislative branch, that's Congress, whose job is to make the laws. Article 2 establishes the executive branch, the president, whose job is to enforce those laws. And Article 3 creates the judicial branch, the federal courts, whose role is to interpret the laws. The key takeaway here, nobody gets to do all 3 jobs. Now, it's really important to contrast 2 concepts that honestly get mixed up all the time. Separation of powers is just handing out those different jobs to 3 distinct branches. But checks and balances, that is about giving each branch the power to supervise, limit, and even stop the others. So, for example, if Congress makes a law, the president can check them by vetoing it. If the president signs it, the judicial branch can check both of them by declaring the law unconstitutional. They're basically locked in this continuous, intentional tug-of-war.
Which brings us to Section 3, Federalism, sharing the power.
We've talked about the horizontal division, so now let's explore the vertical division of power, moving from the national level all the way down to the states. This brings us to a crucial civics term for us, federalism. It's basically an institutional arrangement dividing power between 2 relatively autonomous levels of government, the national government and the state governments. The really key word here is autonomous. Both levels have the capacity to act directly on behalf of the people, and both get their authority granted straight from the Constitution. So here is exactly how that power is dealt out. The national government gets what we call enumerated powers. These are specifically listed in Article 1, Section 8, stuff that affects the whole country, like declaring war, coining money, and regulating interstate commerce. On the flip side, we have reserved powers. Because the framers really wanted to protect state authority, the 10th Amendment essentially saves any unlisted powers exclusively for the states. We're talking about things like running local schools or issuing driver's licenses.
And you can see how brilliantly those enumerated powers translate into the real world when you look at actual financial realities. Looking at the 2019 federal budget, the national government's powers to provide for the general welfare and common defense really stand out. We see 24% going to Social Security, 24% to healthcare programs like Medicare, and 18% to defense, with safety net and other programs taking up the remaining 34%. This blueprint isn't just theory, guys. It dictates exactly how trillions of dollars are spent.
All right, let's pause and check again. Since power is divided vertically between the nation and the states, and well, both need money to operate, can both the national and state governments decide to tax you at the exact same time?
The answer, as you probably already know if you've ever looked at a paycheck, is yes. The immediate reasoning here is that taxation is what's called a concurrent power. This simply means it is a responsibility shared and exercised by both levels of government simultaneously. Some other concurrent powers include borrowing money and establishing court systems. Basically, the two levels of government operate at the exact same time over the exact same citizens.
But what happens when they inevitably bump into each other? The crucial point here is the Supremacy Clause, which is found in Article 6. It clearly states that the Constitution and federal laws are the supreme law of the land. It acts as an impartial rulebook for resolving conflicts. Basically, if a state law directly clashes with a legitimate federal law, the federal law prevails. It is the ultimate tiebreaker that binds the entire country under one unified body of laws.
Now let's head into Section 4, Amendments and Protected Rights.
A blueprint drawn up way back in 1787 really wouldn't be much good today if it couldn't be updated, but the framers made changing the Constitution intentionally difficult. It is a truly arduous process. Step 1 requires approval by a 2/3 supermajority in both houses of Congress. And then Step 2 requires ratification by 3/4 of all the states. They absolutely didn't want the foundational rules changing just because of a passing political mood. Changing the Constitution requires broad, sustained, supermajority support across the entire nation.
The Statue of Liberty serves as a perfect symbol for our next point, because the ultimate goal of all these complex structures we've talked about, the separation of powers, the checks and balances, the federalism, isn't just to create a messy, complicated government. The real goal is to protect your liberty and individual rights. The structure itself is literally a shield for your freedom. And the Constitution explicitly outlines limits on government power to protect that freedom. We have the Bill of Rights, which are the first 10 amendments protecting vital individual freedoms like speech and religion. But honestly, even back in Article 1, the framers wrote in strict limits. The writ of habeas corpus protects you against illegal, secret detention. There are no bills of attainder, meaning Congress absolutely cannot declare you guilty without a trial. And there are no ex post facto laws, which means the government cannot criminalize and act retroactively. These are hard, non-negotiable stops on government overreach.
And finally, Section 5. Recap and final question.
Let's quickly lock in today's learning objectives and rapidly review these core pillars. First, the foundation is popular sovereignty and limited government, meaning we are in charge and the government has strict boundaries. Second, power is divided horizontally into 3 independent branches, locked together with checks and balances. Third, power is divided vertically through federalism, balancing enumerated national powers with reserved state powers. And finally, the whole blueprint is future-proofed through an arduous supermajority amendment process and heavily guarded by the Bill of Rights.
I want to leave you with a provocative transfer question to test your new structural knowledge. Let's say a massive, revolutionary new technology is invented tomorrow, something the framers could never have even imagined. Based on the constitutional blueprint you just learned, should creating laws to regulate it be an enumerated national power, a reserved state power, or a concurrent shared power? Think about how the Supremacy Clause and things like interstate commerce might apply here. Take the structural rules we just explored and try to apply them to the future. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning how our constitutional blueprint shapes the world around you.